Hey, it's going on YouTube, so knows best here. The day has come that Steve Jobs is getting a little bit more open. He actually released an open letter on Apple's website explaining his thoughts about Flash and Adobe. Pretty much he hates them. All right, everybody knew this, but he made a letter just explaining some really clear-cut reasons of why he doesn't like it. I'll put a link in the sidebar, so after this video you can actually go read the letter. It's definitely a great read, especially for all the geeks out there who've been following this little ongoing battle between Adobe and Apple. But he hit a few points in the letter that I'm just going to hit real quick. And first, he kind of went after the claim that Adobe is open as far as an open standard, and Apple is a closed company, and they don't allow any innovation or people to do anything on their platform, which is totally false. Because Apple has created the WebKit, which is basically the platform for a lot of web browsers out there. Safari uses it. Google uses it with the Android browser. Palm uses it. Nokia uses it. RIM or BlackBerry is going to be using it here shortly. They already announced. So WebKit, which is developed by Apple, okay, it's an open standard that people are using to develop the browsers for the mobile web and also just regular browsers in general, as Chrome is actually on Windows and Mac as well right now. And how Adobe is not really open. Flash, people can't rearrange Flash and take it a certain way. Flash is what it is. All right, they can't rearrange it, package it a different way, get in there and change the code and redo something. They can't do that with Flash. So the claim about open and close is definitely out the window with that. And what Steve Jobs says that Adobe's been claiming that people want Flash on their mobile devices because 75% of the web is Flash based, which is true. But what Steve Jobs hit on that is that he broke it down to as far as what users actually look at. YouTube makes up 40% of online video content on the web. YouTube makes up 40% and growing 40% of the video that you're going to be watching on YouTube. So it's pretty much a 50-50 chance if you're watching any type of video on the web, you're going to be watching on YouTube. And YouTube has created great application for the iPad, iPhone, iPod Touch, the YouTube application, which you're going to be using anyway. That's an easier, better way to browse YouTube videos than actually open up the browser and actually go into it itself. So YouTube has already created apps, so they're already on board. But other websites like CNN, Hulu, all these other major websites that most people visit are going to already change over to HTML5 or making that transition. So nobody can sit here with a straight face and tell you that HTML5 doesn't run better than Flash. Nobody can say that with a straight face. Flash sucks compared to HTML5 definitely as far as performance. And so when Steve Jobs hit on performance-wise, performance, first we'll hit this. Flash on the Macs as far as desktop and laptops, Flash is the #1 reason why you have a bad experience on your Mac. As far as it always crashes your browsers, no matter if you're in Chrome, Firefox, Safari, it's always crashing. And that's the #1 reason that Mac users complain about. And Steve Jobs says Adobe has done anything to address this. Now they're coming out recently with some Flash is going to be able to adapt some of the GPU or your graphics card to help run it. But that's really sad that it has to do all that to do it. I'm glad they're finally doing it. But that's sad they got to tap into your GPU just to run Flash on a web browser. It kind of sucks. But anyway, it just hasn't been performance-wise. It just hasn't been that good. And then again, with the security performance of it as well, Symantec, which makes Norton antivirus, they came on and said that Flash is one of the most unstable and has one of the worst security records in the history of Flash. Is one of the worst security records. And this is a security company. That's all they do. No relationship to Apple. They came out and said that, and it is true. Most hackers and all these people are putting these embedded in Flash and all this stuff because it's so easy and it's so everywhere, widespread, that Adobe hasn't addressed those concerns yet. So Steve Jobs, I really look at Steve Jobs and Apple, what they're doing by making this stand of not allowing Flash on these devices. They're basically doing what your parents do, right? When you were younger, your parents sometimes forced you or made you do something. But after you actually did it, you realize that, yeah, that was the best thing for me. That was the best way. And you didn't know that at the time, but at the time when they made you, and they told you that you had to do that thing, of course you looked at them as the bad guy, right? So well, they must hate me. Why are they doing this to me? They're trying to make my life miserable. But at the end, you realize that it was the right thing. And that's what Apple is doing. The consumer doesn't always know what we want. As consumers, we don't always know what we want, but it's innovators who take the time and think about something and make that decision for us, and then eventually we realize that. I found myself a lot of times been like, I seen a product, an infomercial, something real stupid, like the slap chop, that stupid thing. And you'd be like, well, why didn't I think of that? Why didn't I think of that? Everybody said that stuff to themselves. Said that to themselves sometimes, but it's basically because it's that person's job. That person is good at that. So let them innovate. And what Apple is doing is that, you know, people don't realize that H.2 or HTML5 is going to be the new web standard. It's definitely better for it. They're kind of forcing us to make that transition. This is forcing developers and the major websites to make the transition to that, and I'm happy for it. You know, so, and then battery life sucks. You know, I played with the Flash browser on the Droid, of course the Android, the Droid, and went to YouTube, and it just sucked. I mean, it took forever to load. The Flash video was overlapping on the rest of the page. It was just stupid. I mean, it really was horrible. And why use that? You can use a dedicated app anyway. But anyway, I digress. But I'm not going to go over the whole letter, but read the letter. It's a good read, especially for the geeks out there. And Steve Jobs really just hit it on the head. And us Apple fanboys, we've been trying to explain it, you know, in this type of way, but Steve Jobs hit it right on the head. And everybody should be able to explain his reasoning behind Flash and why I think it's actually going to be a good run for the consumer in the long run. All right, it's been So He Knows Best here. Thanks for watching. I will catch you later. Peace.